All right, welcome guys to Project Mass Uncensored. Obviously you guys are doing great out there. We're getting a lot of positive feedback, and the thing is, obviously we get a lot of questions out there. That's why we wanted to sort of open up this forum today. So the first question that we got is, it says, your program says to go lower carb in the morning, but what about if I train in the morning? Don't I need carbs?
Well, not necessarily. You don't have to have carbs first thing in the morning. Most people think you need a lot of glucose in your system and really you need to spike your glucose levels, and that's really not true, right, Doc?
Yeah, no, it seems not to be true. Here's the thing, guys. A lot of guys are like, oh, essentially, you store your carbohydrates in your muscle and in your liver. Now, when you're lifting heavy weights or you're doing hypertrophy training, you're using mainly the carbohydrates in your muscle. And those, after an overnight fast, stay intact, literally like nearly 100% intact. So in reality, you wake up, you still have all the carb stores that you need in your muscles to train hard. So what you need is an energy source that gives your brain enough fuel to perform. You can get that with a low carb, higher fat type of meal. Like, what are some of the stuff you like in the morning?
So one of the things that I really like is having whole eggs instead of just egg whites, because it also has a full profile of amino acids. You're also getting fats in there, throwing in some bacon as well. And then you can also have what we call bulletproof coffee. A lot of people like having that during their mornings. A morning routine is usually coffee, eggs, bacon, and in bulletproof coffee you have some butter in there as well, some MCT oil, and you just blend it up and kind of makes it frothy.
Yep. Now, one of the things that Lawrence pointed out is the medium chain triglycerides, the MCTs. These are really special fats. Mostly when we have fats, they're what are called long chain, and long chain take a long time to digest through your digestive tract. Once they get into your blood, they have to go into the muscle, and then they have to get transported into the actual cellular furnace called mitochondria to get burned. That takes a long time. So yeah, of course you don't get quick energy. But medium chain triglycerides, they don't require any transport mechanism. They go right into the blood, straight into the muscle, straight into the mitochondria, and they get burned a lot like carbs. And then they produce something called ketones, which actually give you like a huge fuel source. So basically, that's why you might, if you're cooking the eggs, you might even put some coconut oil in there, which is high in medium chain triglycerides. So coconut oil is a real good alternative. You can mix that into whatever you're eating, and that should get you good to go for your workout.
All right, well, let's hit Hank's question. How important is sleep in this program?
All right, well, sleep is very important. The thing to really realize is that bodybuilders, I know, spend a lot of time essentially focusing on training, focusing on their reps, their rest, how intensely they're going, switching up, and that's essential. We also know that rest is very, very critical to your training. Basically, what happens is when you get a low amount of sleep, like if I were to sleep, for example, less than 6 hours, in reality, you want to get more than 8 hours, but obviously that's hard to do. But if you're doing Project Max, you really need to. But if you get 5 hours of sleep, the next day what happens is you become insulin resistant. What does that mean? The carbs that you eat are not going to go to muscle as easily. That means you're going to get lower pumps, and that's a bad thing. But also, you're super hungry the next day. You're eating more food, but you're insulin resistant. It's not going to your muscle, so what's happening? You're spilling over to get fat. So that's why you kind of need to focus on your sleep. Is there anything you do like focusing on your sleep?
Well, we like to also take some supplementations while we sleep. One thing that I really like is ZMA has magnesium in it. Magnesium is really great to really keep your sleep going on longer and help give you better quality of sleep. Then also taking casein at night as well. Because a lot of people, they wake up with a lot of hunger throughout the evening. And kind of while you're sleeping, you don't want to wake up just for random reasons because of hunger or really that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that a lot of times, guys, it's hard to fall asleep, but like Lawrence said, magnesium speeds the onset of sleep, so I highly recommend that. And also, a lot of people are vitamin D deficient, and that's actually one of the reasons why you wake up in the middle of the night, is because you're vitamin D deficient. So essentially, you want to have those. And the other thing that I highly recommend, what the science shows, is you need to set up an environment that's conducive to sleep, because you grow when you sleep. And actually, since I talked about insulin sensitivity, you actually get leaner when you sleep for the rest of the day and you're less hungry. So basically what we recommend is you set up a room that's quiet and very dark. I mean pitch black, pitch black. Also, take your phone, put it under your bed, turn off the sound of the text message. Do not check your text messages in the middle of the night because that's going to get your mind going again. We don't want that. So put your phone away, put a real quiet environment before you go to bed. Don't watch something that's going to get you super excited, and that's going to go a long way.
I like that answer. Let's also go with Jesse. So when they use blood flow restriction, do you guys unwrap or leave the wraps on between sets? So a lot of things, that's a really big question. So as you know, it takes a while to actually put in your blood flow restriction wraps and untie them. You leave them on for the whole time to increase the cell swelling. It really helps with the pump. So don't take it off. Just keep it on and keep on rolling throughout the, I think we have, what, 3 sets in it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a key point, guys, and that's one of the major questions we keep getting is basically like, yeah, should I just take off the wraps between sets? Remember how blood flow restriction actually works. Like Lawrence pointed out, one of the main reasons is that you're getting cell swelling. And so basically the cell swelling will go down if you take the wraps off. Everything that I really want to point out to you guys is that the other reason why you're growing is because you have this metabolic stress. And so basically metabolic stress is like lactic acid. Now think about this. You use blood flow restriction, you're trapping lactic acid in the muscles, right? So what's going to happen if I unwrap? All the blood's going to flow back in there. It's going to clear that lactic acid out, which completely defeats the purpose of doing blood flow restriction in the first place. So again, usually our protocol is like 30 reps and 3 sets of 15 or something like that, and basically keep the reps on the whole time you're doing that.
Let's talk about interset stretching. What is it about interset stretching that allows me to grow?
That's a really good question. First off, like, you want to talk about interset stretching, about kind of how you use it, or just how you use it in general?
Okay, so let's talk about interset stretching then. So basically, when you're doing interset stretching, you'll go for a high rep range, around 10 reps to get started. You'll get a nice pump and cell swelling inside your muscles, and then the interset stretching, you'll let the weights actually stretch you out. And what that does is kind of stretch your fascia, start some really splitting your cells, and really just getting what really intense pump, I guess.
Huge intense pump. So here's a cool thing, like, you know, and this is kind of a real novel technique, and like our lab here is actually the first to actually really look at this using like bodybuilders. So basically, what ends up happening is that when you actually stretch the muscle, it puts tension on the muscle, and that's really, really, really important to understand. If you look basically at the literature, if you take a muscle fiber in isolation and you just put it on stretch, most people don't know it actually increases protein synthesis. Now, Dr. Joey Antonio showed that if you do chronic, extreme stretching models, that actually caused something that's called hyperplasia. So we had to think about, well, how do muscles grow? Well, muscles grow a number of different ways. One is a muscle is made of a lot of muscle fibers, and the muscle fibers themselves can enlarge. That's called hypertrophy of the muscle fibers. One thing that Lawrence talked about is splitting the muscle fiber. That's another mechanism they can grow. And what that's called is hyperplasia, where you create new muscle fibers. So basically, when you get an extreme pump and you actually put it on stretch in between sets with the activity, there's data to suggest that you might actually create hyperplasia. So not only increase muscle fiber size, but you may get increased muscle fiber number, particularly if you're advanced, an advanced trainee.
So yeah, everybody do interset stretching. Don't be a wuss.
That's pretty much it.
All right, so now we have a ladies' question. Good fat versus bad fat. Can you break it down for all of us ladies who are a little scared to load up on fat, please? I'll let you handle that one.
Okay, well, okay, this is a real that's a hard question. Okay, so basically, here's the thing about fat. If you think about it for a second, in our society, fat is villainized, right? It's 100% villainized. So, you know, if you were just look at the news and you look at like what people talk about, you would conclude from reading books that fat kills you, fat causes cardiovascular disease, fat makes you obese, fat makes you insulin resistant, fat makes you all of these things. But the thing is, if you look in our society, once we made these recommendations on fats, that's actually when our society started becoming more obese and more diabetic.
But now, is that only when you combine fats with high carbs, right? High fats and high carbs. That's when all those effects happen.
Exactly right.
So you just have to choose one of the two energy sources.
Exactly right. So basically, you would think of fat as energy. Carbs are an energy source. But what happens is when we eat fats, it gets digested and it goes in the bloodstream. Now, what's the problem? Once it goes in the bloodstream, it has to go into the muscle, and then it goes into basically this machinery inside of muscle that many of you have heard of, we call mitochondria. So mitochondria is where we burn fat.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, these fats have to go into the mitochondria to get burned. Okay? Well, here's the problem. There's a transporter inside of the mitochondria, and if that transporter gets inhibited, fat doesn't go inside, it backs up, and it basically causes a response that makes us insulin resistant, obese, fat, all the bad things that we can imagine happen to us. Well, guess what? Guess what blocks that? Carbs,
mm-hmm.
right? And insulin in general. So basically, if I consume carbs like Lawrence said, and I consume high fat, outside of the medium chain triglycerides itself, all fat becomes really, in that sense, bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not using it as fuel. It backs up and it causes problems. So essentially, if you, for example, if you look at Lawrence's breakfast, you're like, oh my God, he's eating bacon? You know, how's he still lean? Well, because his breakfast that has bacon, it doesn't have carbs in it. So all that's happened with the bacon fat is just going to go straight into the mitochondria and get used as fuel. So that's why in this program we try and separate the fats from the carbs, and you have the fats earlier in the day and then what you call it later. Good fats, though, as far as that we recommend, definitely medium chain triglycerides. You know, if you are consuming fats that are with carbs, it would be more like the unsaturated ones are better, like fish oil and salmon and stuff like that. But saturated fats are actually good for you and good for your hormonal profile when they're not combined with carbohydrates. Then they don't become bad. They actually become neutral.
So basically any fats you take, like if you're on a ketogenic diet where 7% of your calories come from fat,
yep.
It really doesn't matter what type of fat you get for the most part.
Exactly. So like that's actually one thing we're studying a lot in our lab. We're talking about is ketogenic dieting. And ketogenic dieting, basically, all the rules change. Because essentially you don't have carbs around. So we've actually found in our lab that good cholesterol goes up, for example, when you have very low carbohydrates. So that's a great question. Here's a really good question, I think. Basically, a lot of people ask, like, oh, branched chain amino acids,
mm-hmm.
right? You know, what's up with that? Like, what's the point of those? Well, that's one question, and another related question is, well, when should I actually take branched chain amino acids?
Just that is a really big question, because a lot of people don't know when to take that, and when do I actually need to take a protein shake as well.
Yeah, I'm actually taking some branched chain amino acids right now.
Yeah, that's our new MPS day sipping on as we speak, with a little bit of leucine metabolites. We'll maybe talk about that in a little bit. But the main thing is taking BCAAs during or in between your meals, just to keep you anabolic. Most people really don't have enough leucine inside their body, and I'll let Dr. Jacob explain a little bit more about the leucine content and basically refeeding your body in between your meals.
Yeah, so basically, let's think about this for a second. You know, branched chain amino acids, why are they important? Why not just take a whole protein source? Well, the thing is, when you take a whole protein source that's quality like whey, it does have all the branched chain amino acids in there. So if I were to consume 30 grams of whey, 40 grams of whey, no, I probably wouldn't need to add branched chain amino acids to that. The question is then, well, what are they good for? When do you need to use them? Well, and actually, what are they? What's their purpose? Well, basically, you look at a protein, it's made of 20 amino acids, right? 20 amino acids. Basically, 3 of them are driving that growth response that you're interested in, and that's protein synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
Of those 3, like Lawrence just discussed, the major one that we're all familiar with now is leucine. And essentially, leucine, you need to consume at around 2 to 3 grams at about a 2-to-1 ratio between the other branched chain amino acids when you consume them. And that's why the 2-to-1 ratio, because that's what's actually inside of your muscles themselves. So when you have a meal, you get all the branched chain amino acids you need as long as you have high-quality protein. You know, for example, whey is like 11% leucine, casein's close to 10% leucine. They're very high content. Eggs, Warren said he ate them in the morning. They're very high in leucine, like 9% leucine. Chicken and beef are like around 8%, whereas your plant-based proteins are very low in leucine. So when you eat a meal, again, you have that. But one thing my brother, Dr. Gabriel Wilson, studied during his doctoral work was how long protein synthesis lasts. And basically, when you eat a meal, protein synthesis lasts for about 3 hours. Then you stop making protein. You actually stop growing. That's not a good thing, obviously, for Project Mass, right? Well, Gabriel was looking, and this was a mystery in science for a long time, but basically what Gabe found is that at that 3-hour mark, amino acids were still in the blood. All you needed was to switch the signal on, and the signal is loosening. So between meals, like Lawrence said, you have branched-chain amino acids, and boom, you turn the light back on. So that's why we suggest having a meal, in between meals, branched-chain amino acids, another meal, in between that meal, branched-chain amino acids, and you can time it for your pre-workout as well. So for example, say you woke up at 6 in the morning and you had a meal, and then around 7:30 you had your branched-chain amino acids prior to the actual event that you're going to train, and then at 8 you trained. So that's kind of how we would recommend sort of putting branched-chain amino acids into your program.
Let's go through, let's see.
Here, this is a good one.
Which one? This one?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Okay, good question. Basically, coming from Hank, can I lose fat on this program even though it's a mass cycle? Well, that comes back to the question, can you gain fat and lose muscle at the same time?
And yes, you can.
Yeah, there you go. And the funny thing is, like, actually, Lawrence came and dexed on our machine last time he visited, and guess what? Even as advanced as he is, he gained muscle and lost fat at the same time. And I remember one time, I've written articles and people have come on, oh, that's impossible. There's no way. That's physiologically impossible. Look at your textbook. And all I can say is, like, well, come visit University of Tampa. I'll open up the machine that's like, you know, a several $100,000 machine. I will open up and show you the scans, and the data is what it is. Essentially, basically, yes, you can lose fat and gain muscle, but you have to create the conditions that allow that to occur. Actually, Dr. Brad Schoenfeld just showed some data the other day. He posted it up on Facebook showing that exact same thing. So the question is, how do you actually do that? Well, remember, gaining muscle is turning on signals in the muscle to grow. Gaining fat is turning on signals in fat to grow. So the point is to maximize the skeletal muscle signals while minimizing the fat signals. If you look at what we do on Project Mass, we base Project Mass calories on a study we did here in our laboratory. And essentially what we did was we did a sort of a leaner bulk versus an extreme bulk. Mm-hmm. And the leaner bulk, we actually gave guys 500 to 800 extra calories a day. And we gave that mostly from protein type of foods. And then we had another group where we actually gave them like 2,000 extra calories a day. The group that got 2,000 extra calories a day gained fat and muscle, and the group that only got 800 extra calories a day, they gained just as much muscle as the extreme calorie group, but they lost fat too. So basically that's what we're doing on Project Mass, is we're trying to do this sort of a leaner bulk. And that's a very important concept, sort of, as opposed to kind of a more the dirtier extreme bulks. Because guess what? Then you're going to have to diet so much harder, and then you're going to lose a lot of that muscle.
So next question. I heard if you bulk for too long, you become insulin resistant and start gaining fat. Any advice?
That's an interesting question.
That's actually a really good question. So that's kind of why we do the lean bulk in Project Mass, so you don't really become insulin resistant. It's only extra 500 calories, and like Doc said, most of them come from protein. I think about 300 extra calories that you get actually come from protein. Another 100 come from fat, so you're really only getting an extra 100 calories from carbs throughout your normal diet, or what should be your normal macronutrients.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's sort of the thing is, the question really is we hear this term insulin resistance, right? And and you know, how do you define insulin resistance? How do you know you're insulin resistant, right? Or the opposite of that, for what a bodybuilder wants, is you're insulin sensitive. So, and what is insulin sensitivity? Like Lawrence and I earlier today sort of ate a pretty epic meal.
We'll post it on Instagram and Facebook soon.
So it's pretty big. And one thing you notice, when Lawrence ate his meal, right after, his veins just popped, right? And what does that mean? Part of insulin sensitivity is insulin is a vasodilator, and insulin drives actually carbohydrates toward the muscle. So he is a very insulin sensitive individual. Basically, that means that insulin does its job very well. And you don't need a lot to drive carbs towards a muscle. Well, what happens is if you gain a lot of fat, if you become fat and gain way too much fat on a bulk, then what happens is that will cause you to become insulin resistant. And one of the ways to notice that is that your pumps are not going to be as good in the gym because insulin's not working as well. So that's why we have some of our advices, like Lauren said, is we're very conservative on the calorie increase, and also we do have you do at least one cardio session during the week. And that will keep you insulin sensitive throughout the cycle. The other thing to know is that one of the things we know that increases insulin sensitivity is having a lot of that mitochondria in your muscle that burns fat. And our high volume training, particularly week 2 and week 3, was designed not just to gain muscle, but to actually increase that mitochondria in your muscle, which makes this a leaner bulk. That coupled together with the cardio mean that you'll go through these 14 weeks and probably at the end of it be more insulin sensitive.
And going back to cardio, that's another question. Cardio, what's our POV on it for Project Mass? What we really like to do is do the HIIT training with Project Mass, just because you're not really breaking down any muscle fibers or really tearing yourself down. It actually becomes anabolic when you're doing HIIT training. So that's why we have HIIT training on your days off, because then it's really not hurting your muscles as well. It's not too demanding. So you're burning a lot of extra calories. You're actually gaining a little bit extra muscle mass, and it's very anabolic. Want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. So remember we talked about this cell swelling response and metabolic stress. The advantage is when you're doing, and also muscle fiber recruitment, when you're doing sprinting, basically you're doing all those things. You know, like for example, on Project Mass, we showed Lawrence doing the Wingate bike. And basically, when you're sprinting that fast, you build up a ton of metabolic stress, and you actually get a pump. And that's going to trigger muscle growth. And the easiest way to think about it is look at a sprinter and compare a sprinter like a marathon runner. Clearly, the sprinting provides an anabolic stimulus, and you become more insulin sensitive, and your metabolism raises. So it gives you everything you could possibly want. Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of people see me talking about heavy whipping cream inside of my YouTube videos, on my blogs, and a lot of other things I do. And why do I love it? Heavy whipping creams, most people don't know, I do a ketogenic diet probably 70% of the year now. 80% of the year. It's just really easy for me to stay lean and keep my size throughout the year. So it's hard to get the extra fats that you really need inside your system. Heavy whipping cream is an easy way to add inside your shakes. It has dairy fats, one of my favorite types of fats. It's easy for me to digest. Heavy whipping cream is easy accessible, and a lot of your proteins are fat soluble, so they actually mix better in fat.
Yeah, it's a great point. So actually, and we talked a little bit about ketogenic dieting before, so might as well we'll explain a little bit about ketogenic dieting. Lawrence is actually it's cool because he gained a lot of muscle. We scanned his whole body, looked at all his muscle. He gained a lot of muscle and lost fat. And he was eating. I mean, tell him about some of the stuff that you're eating on keto.
So I was having a great time on keto. I still am. I go to Wendy's probably 2 to 3 times a week, or Burger King, and so you're just basically eating fatty cuts of meat. So it's a lot cheaper, especially if you're on a budget. You're eating chicken thighs instead of chicken breasts. You're eating high-fat beef, like sirloin steaks, ribeyes, 75, 25 MCT oil, like coconut oil, or straight processed MCT oil, palm fat, bacon, and solid greens. So you're basically just cutting your carbs back. 7% of your diet comes from fat, 20 to 25% comes from protein, and about 5% comes from high fibrous carbs. So you're thinking about nuts and green vegetables.
Yeah, so Lawrence is going to become the keto master. And so why is it called ketogenic dieting? Because normally most people are adapted to eating carbs. And when I eat carbohydrates, essentially that's my main fuel source. Not adapted to using fats. And that's fine. But what happens is when you take the carbs away and you go high fat, and the key is to go high fat, you can't go in halfway. When you go all the way high fat, what essentially happens is that your body switches its primary fuel source to fat, and it actually produces an alternative fuel source called ketones, and that gets your brain going. One of the things that I kind of want to point out also to you is that Lawrence talked about using heavy cream. Well, heavy cream or dairy fat itself is high in the medium chain triglycerides that we talked about earlier. So it's basically high in the medium chain triglycerides, and that produces more ketones than normal fats. So that's another reason why cream is really good. And actually, that brings me back to like one of my favorite breakfasts, the keto mousse.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's literally on point. So basically, we wake up in the morning. A lot of guys in our lab, because a lot of times we're here doing experiments like super early in the morning. 5 in the morning sometimes. We do a study. So we wake up. I have in my lab, we got a big fridge, and we have heavy cream. You pour heavy cream right into a bowl, and this is freaking awesome. I gotta be honest. Then you take like whey protein. I like chocolate whey or like birthday cake whey. I pour it in there, and then I put unsweetened dark chocolate. It's basically just fiber. And then after that, I put coconut oil, and I mix that up. And the coconut oil you put in the fridge is going to kind of get a harder texture. You take it out, it's keto mousse. You have the whey to give you amino acids. You got the medium chain triglycerides, which burn so fast that your ketones go up and give you an alternative fuel source, and you program your metabolism for the rest of the day.
And let's keep going up then.
Well, they say, what was a good one? What forms of cardio?
Where's that?
I saw that right down there. Yeah, so what forms of cardio do you recommend if you don't have a Wingate bike? What are some of the types of cardio you do on the road?
There's quite a few. So you can do, it depends. You could go low impact and go like just on a regular resistance bike or a regular bike that you could find at almost any gym. All you do is set the intensity to the highest level you can go, pedal as hard as possible, as like you're doing basically a sprint, basically the same thing as a Wingate bike. And then as your rest time comes and you're kind of cycling through for the next 30 seconds, 45 seconds, you just lower the resistance until you can catch your breath. And right when you catch your breath and you feel like your power is ready to go back up, ramp it all the way back up to probably level 15 or 16, whatever the bike goes to, and pedal as hard as possible for 15 to 20 seconds.
Yeah, so that's definitely a great way, and that causes a lot of effects. Another kind of really interesting way where you can mimic the Wingate is like, and I think you're just talking about this, where you sprint all the way out, and then your partner puts the resistance up after you reach a certain speed. That's another thing that actually, if you look in the video, that's what we were doing with Lawrence at Powerhouse Gym.
You can do that in a spin room, basically. They have spin room bikes.
Yeah, so when people come in, basically into our lab, we put them on this Wingate, and I'm like, you're going to do a 10-second sprint. I'm like, whatever, I can do a 10-second sprint. They're like, 30 seconds? I can do that in my sleep, right? And then after they do a 30-second sprint, they never want to do it again for the rest of their life. So how do you mimic that? Well, the unique part about the Wingate bike is that basically we know that there's a basically inverse relationship between speed and force. So, for example, if there's a lot of weight on the bike, I can't get high speed, right? But if there's low weight on the bike, I can get high speed. So what you do is you start with no weight on the bike with your partner. It could be a spin bike like Lawrence recommended. You do a spin bike and you pedal all the way out as fast as you can, and after a few seconds, then your partner ramps the tension up immediately, and now you have high force and high velocity at the same time, and then you just hang on for, like Lawrence said, 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds all out, and then you're going to feel a serious burn. What other forms of cardio do you like?
You can also do sprints. That's also great. If you have a sled or a parachute, that's always great to do as well. You'll sprint about 50 to 100 yards, and then you'll walk the corners if you're on the track. You'll just walk like the 50 yards, sprint the hundreds, and that's also another way to do some HIIT training that we recommend.
Yeah, and I like lines and hills. Those are really good as well. One of the things I like Lawrence pointed out, like one of the unique parts about doing like a bike and a sprint is remember you don't want to hamper gains in your strength, like when you're doing squats, for example. So if you look at a squat, it's got a large range of motion, large range of hip motion and knee motion. When you're doing sprints, it's the same thing. You have high range of motion in your knees and hips, so it's more specific and won't interfere with your squat. One of the reasons why we see traditional cardio like long duration running interfering with your squat is because you have very low range of motion, so you're teaching your nervous system to not recruit muscle like you actually would if you're doing like the squat. So that's the next question here.
All right. So I train in the evening. We haven't hit evening training yet.
Okay.
So when I come back from the gym and it's late, should I eat a lot before bed, or should I just? Where'd that go? Okay, it's totally just disappeared on me.
So I'm guessing basically saying, do I eat a lot before bed, or just should I taper back that food? Okay, that's a really good question. The question is like, if I train late at night, should I have a ton of calories like after I eat? That's a really, really difficult question. What I can tell you is that they've done studies where essentially what they did was, it's actually a very recent study that Ryan Lowry and my lab showed me. What they did was they took calories and they gave a huge meal either right before they exercised, or they gave a huge meal after they exercised. Okay? Now you got to remember, when you eat a meal, amino acids are going to be in your blood for a long time, right? So 90 minutes later, 2 hours later, they're still going to be there, all right? So and again, this is what kind of Ryan pointed out to me, is that basically he showed the study to me, and essentially when they had the calories like before they actually exercised, they were leaner than when they had all of them like immediately after exercise. And one of the reasons for that is, especially when you look at our training, when you eat a meal and then a lot of negative effects of a large meal is that it might stimulate insulin and cause you to store fat. But when you exercise, you release a lot of hormones that counter the insulin. And so basically, if you have that larger calorie meal and provide yourself with all those nutrients before you train, so they're in your bloodstream while you're training, the things like adrenaline will counter the negative effects and prevent you from storing fat, and it'll actually drive some of those nutrients toward muscle. And then basically after that, you eat a moderate meal, is what I would say. So basically, that would be my suggestion, is basically still have a substantial meal before you train, even if it's at night, even if it's a shake form. And yes, then afterwards, yeah, probably focus on maintaining protein balance. So you're gonna have your quality proteins, be moderate on carbs at that point, and things of that nature.
All right, like that.
Oh, here's a question. So, can you explain the science behind the taper in this program? So that's a really good question. Okay, so first off, what is tapering? Basically, most people, when they feel overtrained and beat up, basically what ends up happening is that they will rest. So I just need to take a week off. Now, I kind of want to point out, there's a really good scientist out of Penn State, and his name is Vladimir Zastyorski. Vladimir Zastyorski. And Vladimir Zastyorski, real complex name, real complex scientist. Basically, what he showed in his research, that taking a week off, taking 2 weeks off, yeah, it could be good like for joints, but for your muscles, you actually start to lose muscle. You lose some of the enzymatic adaptations that you have. And so what he's basically saying is, a lot of people take a couple weeks off. Oh, I just need to recover. The problem is that what Vladimir Zastyorski said is like this: like, why would a mountaineer climb a mountain, get halfway up, go back down, and then climb the whole mountain? It doesn't make sense. So to find a way around that, people taper, and a taper is essentially you keep training, but you back the volume off. So you notice what Lawrence and I did in this program is, we cut the volume down in half, meaning you're doing half the sets, half the amount of exercises. And so essentially what that ends up coming down to is that you can recover. And remember, one of the things I want to point out to you guys is that, I remember Lawrence and I, we were designing this program and stuff. We put some brutal stuff in there. Brutal stuff. And you're not going to see your gains oftentimes during the first week, during the second week when you're beat up.
Right.
You see them when you rest. And that's what the taper is, where we back off on the volume. That's when your muscles have a chance to fill out. And the funny thing is, Dr. Kostal actually found that just like a 7 to 10 day taper actually by itself made muscle fibers grow something like several percentage points. So that's why during that taper week you should fill out and become much fuller and ready to go for week 5.
Okay, this is another good question. Why is there no abdominal exercise in the Project Mass? Now, we hear that question quite a bit. We didn't design it in the program just because you'll be doing a lot of external ab work, basically like how we have standing military press that's doing core work. Squats also do a lot of core work. That actually works your core more than actual doing crunches. Actually activates your abs a little bit more, so that's why we don't have it. But if you want to do extra ab work, you can always do it on your rest and cardio day.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Is that here's the thing, like if we look at the electrical activity in your muscles, like in our lab, and we have you do a crunch, or we put that electrical activity on, we measure that, and then we have you do a heavy squat. Guess what's getting more abdominal activation? I can guarantee you that it's the heavy squat. So you actually are activating your abs. We actually do have core training when we have you lifting heavy compound movements. But like Lauren said, yeah, cool, you guys want to train your abs, go for it. A good day to do it is basically on your off days when you're doing cardio because it's not very stressful, and that will work out just fine. Okay, here's an actual good question that I'm seeing. The question is, what's more important, varying the exercises or the intensity and the reps? Okay, so that is a good question. One of the things that I really love about Lawrence is that every time I train with them, I love it and I hate it, but I can't move the next day. So one of the things is that he's really good at changing the exercises up. He's really good at using a lot of angles and different exercises. And the short answer is both are important. Mm-hmm. Changing the reps and the rest period lengths and things like that.
Yeah, changing the density and the exercise are always great. That's something you have to do because your body does get into homeostasis and just stays content and gets adapted, so you won't ever grow. You'll start to plateau.
Exactly. Remember, the whole point of this program is to never stop growing. So here's the thing you understand. I guess it's very important to understand is that when you're thinking about variation, it's like if Lawrence and I were going to go to the gym today, and we're just like, oh, what do you feel like training? I guess legs. How do you want to train them? Well, let's do supersets. That's totally not programmed. That's totally not planned. It's just like on the fly. And most guys do that. And when they plan it, they always do the same things. And like I know how it is. Like I mean, when like Ryan Lowry and I, we train a lot together. And every time we do chest, it's like we immediately walk towards the bench. And like yesterday, I'm like Ryan, listen, we just did Project Mass. We had to start with a different angle, right? So the point is that intuitively, if you're just playing on the fly, you're gonna go with things that you like. And so you want to change the exercises up. So basically, like in our lab, we did a study, and with Dr. Eduardo de Souza, who's also in our lab. And basically, what we did was we had one group just do squats every week, where basically they started off 4 sets of squats, and then went to 6 sets of squats, and then eventually they got to 9 sets of squats. The other group kept squats in, but they did half the volume of squats, and they varied the exercises behind the squat. And basically, the group that varied the exercise behind the squat got stronger. And what was really cool is, think about the quadriceps. The quadriceps are called the quadriceps because there's 4 heads to the quads themselves. Well, the group that only squatted only increased muscle size in 2 of the heads. The group that did the variations in exercises had full development. All 4 heads of the quads were developed. So like if you look at Lawrence, for example, he's got a lot of separation in his quads. Each quad, he's got a lot of symmetry there. Part of that is because of his exercise selection that he's doing. So that's why I would definitely recommend. The other thing is, let's say you're like, well, I have to squat every workout. Okay, cool. I mean, I think that's awesome. But remember, there's a lot of variations within the squat. So, I mean, how many variations do you know of squats?
At least 15.
Yeah. So, like, front squats,
hack squats, sumo squats, one-legged squats, pistol squats, Bulgarian squats. We could just go on and on and on about different types of squats that you can do to really hit different angles of your quads or hamstrings or glutes.
And remember, guys, one thing we're trying to do with Project Mass is, again, going back to never stop growing, we don't want you to be done with this 14-week program and just go, oh, what do I, oh, it's done. What do I do now? I grew so much. We want you to take these principles and keep applying them.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that is strategically changing your exercise selection up and fashioning that towards your goals is very important. Like, and I can't emphasize that enough.
Well, another good question. So this one's from Ryan. I looked at the calorie counter on the program page. What percentage of increase of calorie intake over what you should be taking and what not doing a mass program? So I think what you're trying to say is basically what's the difference between adding 500 calories to your diet to actually maintaining your mass after you're done with this program?
Yeah.
Okay. So it basically just keeps your calories the same once you hit a plateau, I guess, in your weight. You can really calculate just your macros to stay exactly how you are. We do have our calorie counter on Bodybuilding.com for that reason. So you can say, okay, I want to have, I don't know what your weight is, but let's say you're a 200-pound guy once you're done with this, probably pretty ripped at about 8% body fat, looking pretty good. I already know that. And your calories probably about 2,500 if that's your maintaining weight.
Yeah, exactly right. And so that would be maintenance. And again, if you train really hard,
it could be slightly higher.
Yeah, it could be slightly harder, and you can still change your body composition even like on those maintenance calories. We have seen that. So, really good question. This is a interesting here. How often should I go to the gym? Well,
as many times as you can.
Many times, yeah, it's pretty much the answer. Next question. Actually, notice that in Project Mass, we do have you going to the gym quite frequently. It's a very high frequency split. So everything I want you to notice is like, it's not like a typical bro split. If you kind of notice that, like, so typical bro splits, like, I've had people write me questions on Project Mass and go like, bro, like, bro.
That's my favorite word.
Yeah, it's my favorite word too. So, you're telling me if I train the muscle more than once per week, I'm going to get smaller because I'm going to overtrain. So,
that's a stupid word too.
Yeah.
No, you're overreaching.
Yeah.
Not overtraining.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
totally different things.
Yeah, so which is an interesting question. I want to address the overtraining versus overreaching. Most people never overtrain. Okay, so overtraining means it takes you months to actually recover, and that's actually really important. If it took you months to recover, guess what? You overtrained.
You hurt yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And the only models that we really see like that are like military models where they do sustained military missions, or I will say this: contest dieting. Oftentimes it does take a few months to recover. This is something that Lawrence and I have. We're planning for a very future. Our next trainer we're coming out with later.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming out with a trainer that's going to be called Project.
No.
Okay.
Project something.
It's Project something, and then after Project something, there's going to be another Project something.
Project something too.
Project something too. And in Project something too, we're going to be addressing this issue of recovering with overtraining. But most people actually just overreach, and overreaching takes something like a week to recover from. So the point is that basically, if you look at someone who's really well trained, or you take someone who's untrained,
mm-hmm.
they lift weights, they might increase protein synthesis for 72 hours and maybe longer. So if you're untrained, you train once a week, you probably should be training twice a week because you stop building protein synthesis after like so like basically if you're training and you're training once a week and you're untrained, that's still not ideal even though you make gains because you're only making gains for 72 hours, right? So you probably at least should train each muscle group 2 to 3 times a week. And that's sort of the point. And we'll be talking about later, and I think Project
something.
3?
Project 3 we'll actually be talking about.
We'll be talking a lot about frequency a lot. But I tell you this, definitely more than once a week.
We have a few studies coming out with that as well.
Yep, exactly. More frequently is probably better. As long as you periodize.
What else happened here?
Let's hit maybe like one more question here.
For the PDF coming out soon, Colin, you're going to have to talk to Bodybuilding.com about that, but we might be able to get a PDF version coming out so you can print it out and take it with you.
Let's see. Okay, someone's asking about essentially sort of like we talked about focus
Oh
during
yeah.
the program. So that's a good question to answer this. What's just focus? You know, this mind-muscle connection. Um, well, like Lawrence, like talk about. Well, what do you do? Like when you're doing a hypertrophy day, what's your focus like?
Well, you already need to kind of come into the gym pre-focused. So there's a few things you could possibly do, because if you're working out first thing in the morning, which I kind of recommend if you have a high stressful day, is to work on the morning before phone calls start coming in, emails, and your day becomes too hectic and busy. That might be a way just to kind of keep your mind focused and on the task at hand. Or to sit in your car after work and kind of unwind for 5 or 10 minutes before you actually head into the gym, listen to some music, sip on your pre-workout. That's another great way to focus. Then you can also do it with supplements as well. So caffeine helps you focus and kind of stop receptors of you feeling tired while you're working out. And yeah, I'll let Dr. Jacob talk about more scientific parts of it.
So remember that basically it's not just muscles, it's your nervous system. It's your mind, that's your mind, right? That's your spinal cord, that's the nerves going out to your muscle, and the command center for that is, again, is your brain. And focus, basically, if you're thinking of something else, studies will actually show you won't recruit as much muscle tissue, and guess what? You don't grow in what you didn't recruit, and that's driven by your brain. Now, since this is the last question, let's go a little bit more detail into this. And I want to say this. How you focus during your training is going to be dependent sort of on your goal. So what does that mean? So basically, we've done some studies in our lab where we can put sensors on the muscle. Actually, you saw it with Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
When we put sensors on his muscle, and one of the things, it was actually the
bicep curls.
Yeah, the force eccentrics. Mm-hmm. So we can look at how much activity is in the muscle. So we had our subjects actually lift weights and focus basically on the muscle itself, on one, and when they did that, you saw more muscle activation in the chest and less in the other muscle groups. Now, intriguingly enough, they weren't able to bench press as much weight. Now, so basically what this tells us that, like on a hypertrophy day where it's not about necessarily how much weight you lift, it's about how much muscle you're recruiting and where you recruit it, having an internal focus on the muscle could be beneficial. But when we had them focus externally, we said press the weight away from you, they were stronger, but they had less activation in the chest. And what ended up happening is it distributed the intensity across the whole body. Because a bench press movement, you're driving with your legs, you're using your chest, you're using your shoulders, you're using your triceps. You're using all these muscles, and it distributed that, so you were stronger, but you took the focus off the primary muscle group you were interested in. And so basically on strength days, we recommend you have an external focus, and then on your hypertrophy days, we recommend you having an internal focus. So that's kind of the goal that I would say. It depends on the days that we talk about.
Let's get one last question in, because we got a lecture to go to right after this as well.
We're talking about blood flow restriction and lecture here.
So during recovery week, where we still have volumes half, do you still lift heavy as possible, or let off a little bit? Okay.
Good question.
So recovery week, one thing that we really want to make sure is that you recover, so that's why we cut the volume down in half. But you still want to go to the gym as hard as possible. That's what a lot of people misconceive is intensity. You want to keep your intensity as high as possible. So when you come to the gym, you still want to lift as heavy as possible, do as many reps as possible, use the heaviest weight as possible. That's a really, really big thing. Even though you cut the volume down in half, doesn't mean you cut the weight down in half. So still lift heavy as possible. If you have a 5-pound gain that week, 10-pound gain that week, that's great. Keep improving, keep going, and it's really not going to do that much damage while you're actually recovering.
That's 100% textbook scientific answer right there. Bottom line is what we found is that when we lower the volume and we lower the weight, you lose the gains. So when you lower the volume, you maintain the intensity, that's when you make gains. So that intensity cannot be, you can't let go of that, especially in this program. So great question, but definitely maintain your intensity.
All right, thanks everybody for signing in and talking to us. We'll have another Google Hangout coming up pretty soon. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a great amount of fun, and keep going hard on Project Mass. We really look forward to hearing about your success in this program.
So if you guys have any more questions, you guys can always hit us up on Instagram or Body Space. We're going to start another forum on there as well, and we'll put the link in one of our pages below, and we'll add it to the video as well.
Yep.
All right,
exactly.
so see you guys later.
See ya.